in her hand for almost 10 minutes, wishing it would magically disappear. Christmas at her father's family home in Zambezi Heights was the one thing she feared every year. They never treated her like she belonged. They always preferred her younger sister Mira, the golden child, the perfect one, the one who could do no wrong. Whenever Amani walked into a room, the air got colder. But when Mira walked in, everyone suddenly became warm and cheerful. This year, Amani had planned to stay home, cook herself something simple, maybe watch a movie, maybe sleep through the whole day. But then Grandma Zawina, the billionaire everyone in the family worshipped, sent a message directly to her phone. Amani, you will attend Christmas dinner. You must show gratitude for the house you were given. Amani's stomach tightened. That house, the one everyone praised Grandma for buying her, was the biggest burden she carried. But Grandma didn't know that, and the rest of the family didn't care. To them, Amani had already been gifted more than she deserved. She sighed, rubbing her forehead. She knew exactly how the night would go. Mira would show up in a sparkling dress. Their father would pretend Amani wasn't even standing there. The aunties would whisper about her clothes, and someone would eventually say, "At least Grandma gave you a house." But the part that hurt most was this. No matter how they treated her, she still had to show up. Because Grandma Zawina demanded it. And no one in the family ever told Grandma no. Amani closed her eyes and whispered, "I'll go, but I already know I'm walking into a storm." Amani's life looked simple from the outside, but the truth was nothing close to simple. Every day, she woke up before sunrise, tied her hair back, and rushed to her first job at a small graphic design studio. After 8 hours of smiling at clients and pretending she wasn't exhausted, she ran across town to her second job, working evening shifts at a cafe. By the time she got home at night, her legs felt like they didn't belong to her anymore. And all of this, just to keep a roof over her head. A roof that everyone in her family believed was a gift. Grandma Zawina had paid the deposit years ago and proudly announced to the whole family that she had bought Amani a house. What no one knew was that the remaining payments, the repairs, the taxes, all of it, fell on Amani alone. The house was old, the walls cracked, the pipes bursting every few months. Sometimes the electricity flickered for hours, and Amani would sit there in the dark, wondering how she was supposed to survive another month. Loan officers called her more than her own family did. She learned to silence unknown numbers because they either wanted money she didn't have or offered urgent reminders she didn't want to hear. But Amani never told anyone, not because she didn't want help, but because she knew exactly what her father would say. He always said the same thing. Don't embarrass us with your problems. Handle your life quietly. Quietly. That word felt like a chain around her neck. So she worked, and worked, and worked. She patched leaking ceilings with whatever she could afford. She watched YouTube videos to learn how to fix broken tiles. She cried quietly at night when she realized she would have to skip meals just to pay for another repair. Meanwhile, her family called her lucky. Lucky to have a house. Lucky to have Grandma's support. Lucky to be taken care of. If only they knew that every month, Amani sat at her small kitchen table staring at bills spread out like enemies in a battlefield. If only they knew that she sometimes slept on the couch because her bedroom ceiling dripped water whenever it rained. But she told no one. She suffered in silence, swallowed her pain, and kept moving. Because in her family, asking for help wasn't allowed. And admitting she was drowning would only give them one more thing to laugh at. So Amani forced herself to smile, forced herself to appear fine, and carried her struggle alone, praying that one day, something in her life would finally change. Amani's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she drove through the polished iron gates of Lake Shara Estate. Even after all these years, her grandmother's mansion still took her breath away, not out of admiration, but out of pure intimidation. The house looked like a palace. Tall white pillars, glass walls that sparkled under the evening lights, and expensive cars lined up in the circular driveway like a luxury car showroom. She parked her little beat-up car between two giant SUVs, feeling instantly exposed, like everyone could already see the difference between her life and theirs. Before she even stepped out, she saw her aunt and cousins on the balcony, leaning in to whisper. Their eyes scanned her from head to toe, and Amani didn't need to hear their words to know what they meant. She still looks poor. Inside, the mansion smelled of rich food, expensive perfume, and old money. Crystal chandeliers hung above her, and gold-framed paintings decorated every wall. She could hear laughter coming from the dining room, the loud, exaggerated kind people used when they wanted others to know they were comfortable, happy, successful. Then she saw Mira. Perfect Mira in a shimmering emerald dress, surrounded by family as if she were royalty. Mira turned, spotted Amani, and her lips curled into that familiar smirk. "Oh, good," she said loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "You made it. Try not to act poor tonight, okay?" Two cousins burst into laughter. Someone muttered, "She could have at least worn something decent." Amani felt her cheeks heat up, but she forced a smile, the same smile she'd been practicing her whole life. A smile that said, "It's fine. I'm used to this." But inside, her heart felt like it was shrinking. She walked toward the long dining table that sparkled with crystal glasses, golden cutlery, and plates too fancy to touch. The chairs were velvet, the tablecloth embroidered, and everything screamed wealth. Amani took one of the empty seats near the end of the table, far from the center where the important family members sat. As she settled in, she felt dozens of eyes land on her. They whispered about her dress, her old car, her unfortunate life choices. Amani kept her gaze lowered, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She tried to breathe slowly, reminding herself she just needed to survive this night. Just one dinner, just a few hours, just enough to keep Grandma Zuina satisfied. But as she watched Mira laughing loudly and shining under everyone's attention, Amani couldn't help feeling like she had walked into a place where she wasn't just unwanted. She was a joke waiting to be laughed at. Dinner had barely started when the bragging began. It always did. In this family, Christmas wasn't about love or togetherness. It was a competition. Stage. A chance for everyone to show off their newest wins and pretend their lives were perfect. Aunt Salma went first, announcing that her son just bought a new apartment in Cape Keone. All cash, of course. The table clapped. Uncle Mufasa followed, bragging about his new business deal in Dubai. More applause. Mira, naturally, talked about her recent promotion, adding a dramatic sigh as if she was too busy to celebrate her own achievements. Everyone told her how proud they were. Someone even said she was the pride of the family. Amani sat quietly, staring at her plate, cutting her food into tiny pieces just to keep her hands busy. Her heartbeat thudded in her ears. She prayed they wouldn't look her way. She prayed they would forget she existed. But in this family, silence was dangerous. Then it happened. Her father cleared his throat loudly. "Well," he said, looking straight at her. "Amani, what about you? Anything to share?" The table went silent. Every head turned. Every eye waited. Amani swallowed. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. What was she supposed to say? That she was working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. That her roof leaked when it rained. That she sometimes cried herself to sleep because she didn't know how she would survive the next month. Before she could speak, her uncle leaned back in his chair and laughed. "Oh, come on," he said, waving his hand. "Let's not pressure her. We all know she has nothing to say." Laughter erupted. Loud, sharp, merciless. Someone whispered, "She hasn't achieved anything." Another added, "At least she has a roof, thanks to Grandma's pity." That line hit her like a slap. At least you have a house, courtesy of your grandmother's pity. More laughter. More eyes on her. More heat rising to her face. Amani looked down at her hands under the table, and that's when she noticed it. They were shaking. Not from anger, not yet, but from humiliation. From years of being treated like she was less. From realizing that no matter how hard she worked, this family would never see her as worthy. She pressed her trembling fingers against her knees, trying to steady herself, trying not to cry. The room felt heavy, the air thick, her chest tight. All she wanted was to disappear, to sink into the floor, to run away from the people who claimed to be her family but never offered her love. And as the laughter slowly faded and the conversation shifted back to bragging, Amani sat frozen, her heart breaking quietly, the way it always had in this house. The servants had just started placing steaming dishes on the table when the worst moment of the night arrived. Amani felt it before it happened, that shift in the air, that sudden quiet hum that meant something was coming. She kept her eyes on her plate, hoping to stay invisible, hoping the humiliation was over. But Grandma Zuina never missed her chance to command a room. The billionaire matriarch lifted her wine glass, glanced around the table, and then turned her sharp eyes directly toward Amani. Her voice sliced through the chatter like a knife. "So, Amani," she said, loudly enough that even the servants paused. "Still living in the house I bought you?" The entire table froze. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations died instantly. Even the chandeliers seemed to stop sparkling. All eyes landed on Amani, again. But this time it felt different, heavier. Mira leaned back in her chair with a slow, satisfied smirk, like she'd been waiting for this moment all night. Her cousins exchanged knowing looks. Someone muttered, "Here we go." Amani's throat tightened. Her heart hammered so hard she could hear it. Her palms turned sweaty, and for a second she couldn't breathe. She knew this question was coming. Grandma always asked it, but somehow it still hit her like a punch to the stomach. She forced her lips to move. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Yes, Grandma." It felt like the words scraped her throat on the way out. Grandma Zuina let out a long, dramatic sigh, the kind that carried disappointment, judgment, and a reminder of hierarchy all in one breath. "I expected more from you," she said. The words hit the table like a grenade. Aunt Salma raised her brows. Her uncle nodded as if this confirmed everything he believed. Someone whispered, "She never does enough." Mira looked like she was glowing. Amani stared down at her plate, eyes burning. She felt the weight of every stare, every silent criticism, every memory of struggling alone while this family acted like she was some ungrateful burden. The truth she carried, the sleepless nights, the bills, the repairs, the debt, sat like a stone in her chest. But she couldn't say any of it, because in this house, telling the truth would only make things worse. So she swallowed her pain, swallowed her pride, and whispered, "I'm trying," though no one heard it. The room slowly came back to life, but Amani felt herself shrinking smaller and smaller, wishing she could disappear. Because nothing hurt more than being shamed by the one person she had tried so hard to make proud. Amani felt the walls closing in around her. One more second at that table and she knew she would break right there in front of everyone. So she pushed back her chair, forcing a small, tight smile. "Excuse me," she whispered. Nobody stopped her. Nobody asked if she was okay. They just watched her walk away like she was an inconvenience blocking the view. She moved quickly down the hallway, past the laughter, past the glittering lights, past the fancy portraits of ancestors who never would have accepted her either. When she finally reached the guest bathroom, she shut the door and locked it, and then she collapsed. Amani pressed her hands to her face, trying to quiet the sob that ripped out of her. But the tears came anyway, hot, heavy, unstoppable. All the humiliation from dinner poured into her chest like fire. All the memories she tried to bury rose up. She thought of the night her kitchen pipes burst, flooding the floor while she was on her way to her second job. She had spent hours cleaning in the dark because the electricity kept cutting out. She thought of standing at her front door, whispering through the crack as loan collectors banged on the wood, demanding money she didn't have. She thought of the countless nights she skipped dinner so she could pay another repairman. She thought of watching mold grow on her walls because she couldn't afford the treatment yet. And she thought of her family, sitting in their warm, perfect homes, laughing at her struggle, calling her lucky while she was drowning. She cried harder. The bathroom felt small, like a box holding all the pain she had been hiding for years. She let her body shake. She let the tears fall onto the expensive marble floor. Because in this moment, she couldn't pretend anymore. She couldn't stay strong anymore. Not tonight. She grabbed a handful of tissues and wiped her cheeks, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy, her shoulders slumped. But beneath all that, there was something different, something shifting. Spark. Tiny flame. A voice inside her whispering enough. Enough hiding. Enough suffering in silence. Enough letting this family walk all over her. Enough carrying a burden that was never meant to be hers alone. Amani took a deep breath. She straightened her back. She smoothed her dress and wiped away the last tear. "No more," she whispered to the mirror. "I'm done." And for the first time that night, maybe for the first time in years, she meant it. When Amani walked back toward the dining room, something in her had changed. Her eyes were dry, her steps steady, her face calm, too calm. The kind of calm that made people sit up a little straighter without knowing why. The moment she re-entered, the table went quiet. Even Mira stopped mid-whisper. They stared at her like they were seeing a stranger. Amani didn't rush. She pulled out her chair gently, sat down, and placed her hands on the table. Her heart was still beating fast, but her voice, when she spoke, came out steady. "I need to say something," she began. Few people exchanged confused looks. Her father frowned. Mira smirked, expecting another embarrassment. But Amani didn't look at any one person. She looked at everyone. "You all keep saying Grandma bought me a house," she said softly. "But that's not true." Shock flickered across the room. Someone coughed. Myra's smirk faltered. Grandma Zuena leaned forward slightly. Amani continued, her voice clearer now. "Yes, Grandma paid the deposit, and I'm grateful for that. Truly." She paused, letting the words settle. "But the rest, every payment, every repair, every bill, every emergency, all of that has been on me." The room fell completely silent. Even the clinking of cutlery stopped. "You think I'm lazy. You think I'm ungrateful. You think I'm living a comfortable life," she said, her voice cracking just once. "But while you all sat here laughing at me, I was working 2 jobs just to keep the electricity on." Someone gasped. Her uncle cleared his throat, suddenly uncomfortable. "The pipes in that house burst 3 times. The roof leaks when it rains. I've patched the walls, fixed broken tiles, and had loan officers call me at midnight demanding money." Mira choked on her drink, literally, coughing so loudly that 2 cousins patted her back. Amani didn't stop. She'd been silent too long. "I've skipped meals to pay for repairs. I've walked home in the rain because I couldn't afford fuel. And every single month, I sit at my table with bills I can barely face." Her father shifted in his seat, avoiding her eyes. Aunt Salma suddenly found her napkin very interesting. "But not one of you ever asked how I was doing. You just assumed I was failing. You mocked me. You talked down to me. You laughed at me." Her voice softened. "And all this time, I was drowning." The silence that followed was heavy, thick, almost painful. For the first time in her life, the entire family was speechless. "Uncomfortable. Suppose." Amani leaned back in her seat, her breathing slow and steady. She had finally said it, all of it, the truth she had carried alone for years. And the look on their faces told her one thing clearly. They never saw this moment coming. The silence after Amani finished speaking was so heavy it felt like the whole mansion was holding its breath. Nobody moved. Nobody blinked. Even the candles on the table seemed to burn quieter. Then slowly, Grandma Zuena placed her fork down. Soft click. But that small sound felt like thunder. She pushed her chair back and stood up. Her expression wasn't confused. Wasn't disappointed. It was anger. Cold. Dark. Controlled. The kind of anger that made powerful men tremble. Everyone sat straighter immediately. Even Mira stopped pretending to cough. Grandma looked around the table, her gaze slicing through each person one by one. But she didn't look angry at Amani. Not even for a second. She was angry at them. "I gave that house," she said slowly, "as a fresh start for Amani. A chance for her to stand on her feet." Her voice got louder, harder, clearer. "And you all turned it into ammunition to shame her. You mocked her. You humiliated her. You spread lies." Aunt Salma flinched. Uncle Mufasa stared at his lap. Amani's father opened his mouth to speak, but Grandma raised her hand sharply. "Don't." He closed it instantly. Grandma Zuena wasn't just upset. She was furious, a storm in human form. "I had no idea Amani was carrying this burden alone," she continued. "No idea she was patching up damages, working double shifts, paying debts you all pretended didn't exist." Her voice shook, not from weakness but from rage. "And while she suffered," Grandma said, You all sat here acting superior, laughing, using her struggles as entertainment. Nobody dared to breathe. Then Grandma lifted her chin, eyes blazing. Starting tomorrow morning, I will conduct a full investigation into how this family has treated Amani over the years. Every word, every lie, every betrayal. The room erupted into panicked looks. A cousin whispered, "Investigation." Another muttered, "She can't be serious." But Grandma cut the whispers instantly. "And depending on what I find," she said, her glare turning icy, "I will be rewriting my will." That sentence dropped like a bomb. Myra's face drained of color. Her father stiffened. Several relatives exchanged terrified glances. Everyone knew what Grandma's will meant. It meant property, companies, counts, power, everything they had been sucking up to her for. And just like that, their future was hanging by a thread Grandma held tightly. Grandma turned toward Amani, her expression softening for the first time that night. She placed a gentle hand on Amani's shoulder. "No one will shame you again," she said quietly. "Not while I'm still breathing." Amani felt her eyes sting. For the first time in her life, someone in that room stood for her, loudly, publicly, fiercely. And her whole family sat frozen in fear. The next morning, the entire house felt tense. Nobody slept properly. The cousins avoided eye contact, the aunties whispered non-stop, and Myra's eyes were swollen from crying all night. Everyone knew something big was coming, because Grandma Zawina never made empty threats. At exactly 9 a.m., a maid walked through the mansion calling everyone to the study. Amani's stomach tightened as she followed the line of relatives down the hallway. She felt like she was walking into a courtroom, not a family meeting. When she entered the study, Grandma Zawina was already seated behind her huge mahogany desk. Two lawyers stood beside her, holding thick folders. Everyone froze. Grandma didn't smile, didn't greet anyone, didn't even pretend this was normal. "Sit," she said firmly. They sat instantly. A hush fell over the room. Grandma adjusted her glasses and opened a document. "This is my updated will," she announced. Effective immediately. A wave of uneasy murmurs spread, until she lifted her hand and silence returned. "I reviewed the events of last night," she continued. "I listened to every word said, and I've made decisions based on what I saw with my own eyes." Mira shifted nervously, her hands shaking. Grandma's voice sharpened. "First, Mira Cole." Mira looked up, forcing a smile as if she expected praise. Grandma didn't even blink. "You are removed from all inheritance." Completely. The room erupted in gasps. Myra's mouth fell open. "What? Grandma, you can't. You promised. I'm your favorite." Her voice cracked. She stood up, shaking her head rapidly. "Grandma, please. I didn't do anything." Grandma's expression didn't change. "You mocked your sister's struggles," she said calmly. "You contributed to her suffering, and I will not reward cruelty." Mira collapsed back into her chair, sobbing loudly. Her mother tried to comfort her, but Grandma didn't look away. The study felt colder now. Grandma turned a page. "Next, Amani Cole." Amani froze. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She wasn't sure if she should stand, sit, breathe, or run. But Grandma spoke gently. "You are now the primary inheritor of the Zawina Legacy Foundation." The room gasped again, louder this time. Amani blinked, stunned. "The foundation," the lawyer explained, "manages over $300 million in humanitarian and development projects across Africa." Aunt Salma clutched her chest. A cousin whispered, "$300 million." Someone else whispered, "How is that possible?" Meanwhile, Mira slid off her chair and onto the floor, crying uncontrollably. Amani stood there in disbelief. She had expected a scolding. Lecture. Not this. Grandma looked at her with a soft, proud expression. "You suffered quietly. You worked hard. You showed integrity when others showed arrogance. The foundation needs someone with a good heart, not a loud one." Amani's throat tightened. She didn't know whether to speak or cry. "This isn't just inheritance," Grandma continued. "It's responsibility. leadership, purpose, and I trust you with it. Amani's hands trembled as she nodded slowly, still shocked, still trying to absorb the reality burning in front of her. Around her, the family sat stunned, some angry, some speechless, some pretending to faint. But Amani, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Chosen, finally valued, and it left her breathless. Christmas morning felt different this time. The mansion was quieter, less tense, and instead of whispers and judgment, there was a strange calm in the air. Amani stood by the grand staircase, her heart still racing from the night before, when Grandma Zuina approached her. Without a word, Grandma pulled her into a warm, tight hug. For a moment, all the years of humiliation, all the sleepless nights, all the lonely tears came flooding back. But Grandma whispered softly in her ear, her voice full of pride and love, "You suffered quietly. Now live loudly." Amani blinked back tears. For the first time in her life, someone saw her struggle, truly saw it, and instead of criticism, she felt encouragement, respect, and recognition. Weeks later, Amani moved into a beautiful luxury apartment in Haruma Bay, the kind of place she had only ever dreamed of. Floor-to-ceiling windows, sunlight spilling in, a view of the endless ocean. But she didn't just move for comfort. She moved to claim her life, to step into the world she had earned through courage and perseverance. She started therapy, learning to process years of neglect and humiliation. Slowly, she found her confidence again, layer by layer. And with the Zuina Legacy Foundation now under her guidance, she began making decisions that would change lives across the continent. She was no longer invisible. She was a leader, force, someone who could finally live on her own terms. On Christmas night, she stood on her balcony, wrapped in a cozy shawl, watching the waves crash against the harbor. The city lights shimmered like 1,000 stars, and for the first time, she felt truly free. Free from shame, free from judgment, free from the family that had tried to break her. She took a deep breath, letting the cool ocean air fill her lungs. She smiled, not a forced smile, but one that came from the soul, the smile of someone finally valued, finally chosen, finally in control of her destiny. This Christmas was different. This Christmas, Amani was no longer the girl who hid her pain. She was the woman who had overcome it. And as she looked out over the endless horizon, she knew